Hey, everybody, welcome to the Crit House. I'm Jeff Larson, and we are continuing our MyFIVE series where we talk to people about 5 images that have influenced their creative development. And today we have Jessica Burko, who is the creative director of the PRC, the Photographic Resource Center in Boston. Jessica, thanks for joining us. It's great to have you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, this will be a fun conversation. So everybody, Jessica's images that we are going to be talking about include work from Dorothea Lange, Anne Hamilton, Franchesca Woodman, Robert and Shayna Park Harrison, and John Copeland. So Jessica, I have to say, I am familiar with some of the work you're presenting and talking about here. And this is what I love about this program, is because I do this in large part because I'm not educated. And so I have this opportunity to talk to people like you and learn. And I'm very excited to talk about a couple of the folks that you have chosen for your MyFIVE. But let's start with you. So tell us a little bit about yourself. I said you are the creative director of the PRC, but you are also a photographer. And in that position, you're a curator as well. So who are you, and what are you in the world of photography?
Well, all of my background is in photography, and during my undergraduate and graduate studies, I started doing more mixed media work. So now I categorize myself as a visual artist whose work is rooted in photography. And it is. I feel like my work really, it begins with the photograph, and then it involves other types of structures and medium. So I'm a visual artist and a curator, as you say. And I was doing a lot of independent curating before the PRC, along with curating for other organizations that I worked with. And I'm the creative director at the PRC, which allows me to do really exciting things in terms of programming.
Well, it's certainly an institution in the Boston area, and as I mentioned before, several decades ago, I volunteered there for just a brief period of time. So it's a good place to be.
Thanks.
So you have chosen 5 images, and sometimes people find that sort of a challenging prospect to go through the entire history of not only photography but art. But to choose 5, what did you go through to come up with your 5 images?
Well, I wanted to select 5 images of photographers that have been influential for me. So I didn't feel that it was that hard to think of the artists that have influenced me.
But choosing the images.
Choosing the images. Oh my gosh. It took so long to choose the images. But what was nice about that is, a lot of these artists, I don't look at their work every day. I
Right.
don't look at their work as much now as when I was in school. So it was actually really nice to, to go through. I was flipping through books, I was looking online, and it was, that was really, I appreciate that opportunity to do that.
Yeah, it's that opportunity to kind of go back through your own history, but to remember where you were when you were at that point where you were being influenced by those images.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, let's take a look. So your first image is this amazing image from Dorothea Lange. And Dorothea, she is very well represented in the MyFIVE series with people who have been influenced by her work. This is the first time we have talked about this particular image. So talk to us about why this is here for you, Jessica.
Well, I have been very fortunate in being introduced to photography at a very young age and being very supportive in exploring the arts. I come from an art family. So when I started doing a lot of photography, my parents gave me a Dorothea Lange book, amongst other books. But there was something about her images that were just so captivating. I felt like she wasn't just taking photos of people. They weren't just portraits. They were photos of how the people were inside and outside. It felt like in one image, she was capturing their whole history. It encouraged me to start doing portraiture.
Okay.
So the first real projects I did in photography were portraits going into other people's environments, going into their homes, going into their workplaces. I wanted to try to get images that resonated more of who the person actually is. And I feel that the work I saw by Dorothea Lange really made that resonate for me and really was inspiring. Yeah, I feel like when people who are familiar with Dorothea Lange's work, they might think of Migrant Mother. You
Yeah.
know, they might think of that's sort of the iconic image. This image, I still remember first seeing it and I just couldn't stop looking at it. And it's definitely the eyes.
Yeah.
I mean, those eyes, it is incredible. It sparked my imagination in so many different ways that I really feel like, much more than some other more well-known images by Dorothea Lange, this is one that I've always felt strongly about.
Yeah, I can see why. Thank you. Thank you for showing it. Your
Sure.
second image is Anne Hamilton, and I'm going to admit I am not familiar with Anne Hamilton's work, so I'm looking forward to the conversation.
Well, that's okay. It's been hard over the years when people talk with me about photographers for me to admit that I don't know someone that they're talking about. But it's okay because
Yeah.
it's all about being exposed to new work.
Yes.
So Anne Hamilton isn't strictly a photographer, which might be why you're unfamiliar. She would definitely be categorized as an installation artist. And she does very large room-filled installations that often involve performative elements. And she uses video, she uses photography, she uses, I would say, primarily material. She took these pictures. These are actually 3 individual pictures. I know I'm sort of sneaking in 3 in one image, but they're printed as one image.
I'll allow it.
Thank you. She took these photographs from inside her mouth. So she used her mouth as a pinhole camera. And she exposed, I don't know if it must have been negative and not paper, but she had inside her mouth. So the
Oh,
shape that you're seeing
is her
is from
lips.
the inside of her mouth out.
Oh, wow.
Right? So,
Wow.
you know, that is a very different way of image making. So
Wait, and is she looking at a mirror and that's her?
that's not her. That's not her.
Oh.
Yeah. So she has portraits of people. There's a big series of these, and they're all shot from within her mouth.
That amuses the heck out of me.
Right?
I mean,
Yeah. No, it's amazing. So this was some of the first work I saw of hers, but I definitely saw installations prior to this. And, again, as you're a young photographer, you're a developing photographer, um, you know, generally you start with straight photography, right? So there
yes.
I black and white photography, looking at portraits, looking at women photographers, and doing portraits, but then realizing that you can bring the imaging arts into other media and into other dimensionality was, I think, really got me to start thinking
Yeah.
about photography in a different way.
Yeah. Well, I just this just amuses me. It's just I don't know if that was intended. Maybe I'm misreading it, but I just find it funny. I think it's a
Oh
funny
no,
way.
yeah, no, definitely. I mean, she definitely, she's clever, she's funny. Anne Hamilton, she is very serious and brilliant. But yeah, no, this is hilarious. I
Yeah.
think it's hilarious. Yeah.
So your third artist is Franchesca Woodman with this image. Now, I know of her work, and she has a fairly tragic story. Is that right?
She does. Yeah,
Passed early. So
as I know, she ended her own life in her 20s. I'm not sure exactly how old she was, and I didn't know a thing about her until I was doing my undergraduate work at Rhode Island School of Design, and I started using old cameras that I found at flea markets and thrift shops. and they were all in various states of disrepair. So I was getting odd images, odd negatives. I was getting multiple exposures, and I was getting movement. And I really liked the movement. I liked the idea that it was a still image, but it was capturing some kind of frenzy and some kind of physicality. And I started making this work, and everyone at RISD said, "Oh, it's Franchesca Woodman. Oh, Franchesca Woodman." And I had never heard of her before. But then, of course, when I started looking at some of her images, I absolutely saw the connections.
Your four, Robert and Shayna Park Harrison. Fascinating image. Tell us about this one.
Well, I have to say, I have not yet met them, but maybe after this I can wangle a meeting. Their work was life-changing. I got to see it in a very intimate way because I was interning with the curator of photography at the George Eastman House Museum of Photography. And so I was helping install an exhibition of Shayna and Robert Park Harrison's work. So I saw it, up close and personal. And what blew my mind about it, the images are stunning, but what truly blew my mind about it was how it was being presented. It was photography. It was not framed. It was not behind glass, which of course today sounds very commonplace.
Yes.
But I had never seen anything like that before. And what they were doing is they had printed stunning mural size prints, but they were mounted to what we now call wooden canvases. So it was mounted sort of to the flat side of a very shallow box, the outside of a very shallow wooden box, and they were coated with beeswax. And what the beeswax did is it protected the image. It allowed for not having to be framed, right, or have any protective glass over it. And then the experience of it was multisensory. First, you were able to make more of a connection to the work because there was no glare. There was no glare. It was just you and the work. Then there was this slightly aromatic nature from the beeswax.
Oh, there's a scent, right?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting.
And then there was also, you wanted to touch it, but you couldn't. But well, I did because
you could because you were putting it up. Yeah, special.
But that three-dimensionality of the work also coming out into the space because of the wooden substrate. Then when I step back and look at the actual work, it is magnificent. They create these dreamlike emotional imagery where they create the environment, they blend negatives, they blend images, they create characters, and each one frame just tells an amazing sort of non-linear narrative. And they are all just, the dreamlike quality is really stunning. But the reason I'm saying that it was the most influential thing that has happened during my career for my art is that idea of presenting the work outside of the frame.
Your fifth and final image in our MyFIVE series today, John Copeland. Talk about this one, Jessica.
Yes. So I remember being shown his work in college as an undergraduate. I don't remember the context. I don't remember the class. I don't remember who showed it to me, but I remember that it was a big old hairy guy and that the images were beautiful and that they're all self-portraits, and he was showing parts of himself, not his whole self, but he was showing very close up, very intimate, very focused aspects of his physical body. And so there was this idea of the formality of the work, the composition, the form, but then there were all the underlying thematic aspects of it where it was about him as an older person, and not just his body, but you could see wrinkles, and you could see, scars, and you could see all these sort of parts of him that showed parts of his story, really in a similar way to that image, that first image, that Dorothea Lange image, where you could see or you imagine parts of that child's story, which must have been so hard,
Yeah, right.
and there are some similarities in looking at John Copeland's work. So I remember that. And when I first started doing work that was more autobiographical, and that was around the time where people were telling me about Franchesca Woodman. And I was doing autobiographical work, but I was not photographing myself. I called them portraits of self. And I was using friends as stand-ins. And I had a wig that looked like my hair, and they wore my clothes. And I think it was a more comfortable way to talk about myself through my art, because there was that like distance that was made.
Sure.
But once I started turning the camera towards myself and making images of myself, which was very hard to do, I thought of John Copeland again. And the work that I'm doing most currently, I'm really thinking of John Copeland. Now, in choosing this specific image, it's almost, if you squint and back up, it doesn't even have to be a figure.
Just a form, right?
It's just form and
Yeah.
shape. So I think the form and the shape, rather than the specific subject, is why I chose this image of his work.
5 fantastic images to look at, Jessica. It's been I love the enthusiasm that you bring to your art and to the art that you've been talking about. And I thank you for sharing both the images and your enthusiasm as well. So Jessica Burko, the creative director at the Photographic Resource Center and an artist herself, thank you for joining us on the Crit House, and thank you all for watching the Crit House.